Chapter 1. The end was in the beginning. Put 3 paleovirologists in a room and they'd argue about the human genome, protein-folding structures, and molecular clocks. Give them an audience, and they'd generally agree that viruses may not have been the origin of life, but hijacked it as soon as possible. Get them drunk, and none of their knowledge would protect them from the behaviors that helped viruses thrive. Get Dr. Meg Perriman drunk and she'd tell you the human race was already dead and just didn't know it yet. Peering at the sample in her electron microscope, she'd tell you the same thing sober. "Any news?" Werner Lang asked, leaning over her shoulder, his breath smelling of sauerkraut and old coffee. She jumped, nearly bonking him on the nose with the back of her head. She spun away from the workstation to face him. "You jerk! Have you ever heard of personal space?" He smirked, arrogant in his Teutonic good looks and genius. "At Tuluk, we all learn to work in tight quarters, Dr. Perriman." His use of her professional title was just another affectation designed to annoy her. True, Tuluk Field Station was a small settlement of research facilities 370 miles north of Fairbanks, Alaska, and their lab barely afforded room for 3 people. But she was mostly annoyed that she hadn't noticed him enter. She'd been too consumed by her discovery. Meg responded by referring to him by last name only, maintaining aloofness. "I can adapt to any environment, Lang, but conditions are most favorable when I'm not invaded by foreign bodies." She stepped aside to put some distance between them, which was apparently his goal. He bent toward the microscope to see her sample. She darted to block his path, nearly bumping into him again. "Dr. Perriman," he said, "if I didn't know better, I'd think you like me in your personal space. I'm married and you're—" She waved a dismissive hand. "Whatever you are. There's nothing personal about this, except your need to win." "I read your preliminary report, of course," Meg said. "But this isn't a plant virus. This discovery doesn't support your theory. You're looking for the most complex answer when simplicity is staring you in the face. The truth doesn't care who wins or loses. The animal died of natural causes, as the evidence clearly demonstrates. That only confirms my wider theory regarding the Pleistocene extinctions. Besides, my theory also benefits from contemporary political beliefs and the current zeitgeist of human self-loathing. Either your imaging was wrong, or the sample has mutated since last night." "Impossible," Lang said, defiance and anger creeping into his voice. "You just hate being wrong, don't you?" She studied his cold blue eyes, which were bloodshot and watery from lack of sleep. Did he read her ambition that easily? But it wasn't exactly a secret. She'd compiled a number of publications in her brief career and received several prominent grants. The field was small enough that all the scientists were able to keep tabs on one another, and they all raced for answers to the same questions. When humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge more than 16 centuries ago, the Pleistocene epoch was drawing to an end. Their arrival coincided with the extinction of large mammals. Lang backed the conventional theory that hunting and climate change caused the wave of extinctions. Meg accepted those factors, but also believed migrating humans carried deadly infections that spread among the vulnerable fauna of what later became North America. Both doctors now focused on a pristine specimen that might provide the final clue to the mystery. A giant ground sloth carcass had been discovered in a glacial crevasse in the Brooks Range, and though much of its upper body had been exposed, thawed, and decomposed, field researchers had recovered several mounds of its dung still preserved in ice. Lang had first crack at the analysis because he was in the lab when the researchers brought in the samples. Instead of summoning Meg, he'd compiled profiles of the organic matter and estimated the dung was 10 centuries old. He'd filed a draft report of his findings, pulling an all-nighter while Meg slept through the initial discovery. He'd left some prepped material for her along with a note saying he didn't want to wake her. Worst of all, He'd signed off with a smiley face drawing.
"This isn't a virus," Meg said. "It's a bacteriophage, but there's something strange about it."
Did he pick up on her subtext of doubt? Like a wolf sniffing weakness in prey?
"Nonsense. Just because dung is loaded with bacterium doesn't mean the virus infected it and reproduced inside the bacterial cells."
"This DNA sample," she said, "it's double-stranded and has circular genomes. It's definitely a bacteriophage, but there's something peculiar about the morphology." She motioned for him to look, and he studied the sample for a full minute without speaking. Still glued to the scope, he said,
"This isn't what I saw earlier. This looks like 2 tails and a 3rd strand. Must be a flaw in the optics, because this can't exist."
"Can't exist or just hasn't been discovered yet?" Lang looked up from the scope.
"There is no Genesis virus that sparked all life on Earth. If anything, viruses co-evolved with other forms of cellular life. The finest research facilities in the world haven't been able to confirm what you think you found in the scientific equivalent of a broom closet."
"That's why I'm having samples shipped to RTP," she said, employing the acronym for Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. The Alaska lab lacked some of the more sophisticated equipment Perriman would need for a full analysis. She worked as an adjunct professor at North Carolina State while conducting private research with several local firms. She could work close to home for a few days to confirm her discovery, and hope Lang didn't revise his report in the meantime.
"And it's Easter break at grade school," Lang said. "How convenient."
"Some of us have families, and we can't devote all our energy to work." She was more defensive than she wanted to be, and wondered if she resented his freedom. But after 6 weeks at the remote station, she missed her husband and 2 children.
"The images are recorded," Lang said. "My data stands. Maybe you'll get lucky, find something on the nucleic acid profile, and get a virus named after you. In the meantime, I'll just keep testing more samples and building a case study to support my theory."
"Plenty of sloth crap to go around. Knock yourself out." She removed the sample from the microscope, made sure the vial was properly marked, and returned the collection of vials to cold storage. She didn't think Lang would stoop so low as to contaminate or switch her sample. Because DNA didn't fossilize, finds like the Brooks Range sloth were rare opportunities to trace the virology of a different era. Lang would respect that, even if he didn't respect her. But he had a stake in this too.
"Your Genesis theory has a certain philosophical appeal, but it's far too complex," Lang said. "Life is simple."
"Giant sloths were around for 10 million years, and they just happened to die out shortly after encountering humans for the first time. Seems pretty simple to me."
"Hunting, climate change, migration disruptions, food shortages, a plethora of other apex predators like the saber-toothed cat,
which also died out after human contact." Lang arranged his own samples across the workstation bench.
"A theory is just a theory until it's proven as fact. I'll admit this is a bit unusual, but I see nothing here that changes my mind."
Meg peeled off her latex gloves and safety goggles. "If you prove your theory, I'll be the first to offer congratulations. It's not like either of us will run out of things to argue about. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a shuttle to catch."
"I'll make sure your sample goes out on the truck. It'll probably beat you to North Carolina since it will route through Anchorage. Enjoy your vacation," he added, already dismissing her and submerging himself in his work. Meg entered the decontamination booth, underwent the protocols, and then quickly showered. She dried her hair as best she could, donned another layer over her flannel underwear, and slipped on a parka. Even though it was spring in the northern hemisphere, the outdoor temperature at the field station was in the teens. The sun was setting early, and she wanted a good night's sleep before tomorrow's 8-hour truck ride back to Fairbanks. From there, she'd catch a flight to Seattle with a layover in Chicago, and be home for Good Friday.
She smiled to herself as she crunched through the snow. She pictured the